that exist now. We'll listen in live.
Today to discuss another important step our government is taking to create a Canadian securities regulator. The idea of a Canadian securities regulator is not new. It goes back at least as far as 1935, when the Royal Commission on Price Spreads recommended the creation of a national securities board. Since then, study after study, both Canadian and international, have recommended the creation of a single regulator. Over the years, it seems that almost every generation has taken up the idea. Governments, experts, international organizations, and individual Canadians have all promoted the concept of a national regulator to replace the balkanized system that has evolved. However, in each case, jurisdictional concerns prevented progress and maintained the status quo. So what is the result? Today, we have 13 regulators, 13 sets of rules, and 13 sets of fees. In today's world of interconnected capital markets, where investors can move billions of dollars at the click of a mouse, we need to lower barriers, not multiply them. This step comes at a time when the world continues to emerge from an historic financial and economic crisis, the effects of which are still reverberating. What began as a market turmoil in 2007, sparked by a plunge in the American housing market, grew into a synchronized global recession. As you know, equity markets plummeted. Internationally, many major banks failed or were needed to be rescued by governments. The global financial crisis thrust the role of regulation and the lack of it into the spotlight. The words transparency, prudence, and oversight came back into fashion after too long an absence. We have learned from the experience of other countries that systemic risks can arise from all parts of the financial sector, not just the banking sector. The havoc we have seen in capital markets has had a real impact, and not just on wealthy bankers and fund managers. Small investors, retirees, families putting money away for the future have all felt the effects as investments like RRSPs and mutual funds took real hits in value. Some have had their trust violated by fraudsters like Earl Jones and Vincent Lacroix and lost their life savings in the process. The government owes it to all investors to do what we can to protect them. Certains épargnants ont vu leur confiance trahie.
Some investors have been betrayed by fraudsters such as Vincent Lacroix and Earl Jones. They've lost all of their savings that they have accumulated. The government has a responsibility to all investors to do all that it can to protect them.
Now, we have relative stability in financial markets today, compared at least to the darkest days of the crisis. But we cannot take that stability for granted, as we can see in the events of recent days in Europe. The Canadian financial system is strong, with our banks ranked as the world's soundest by the World Economic Forum. Our system, however, still has one significant flaw. Canada remains the only industrialized country without a single securities regulator. International organizations such as the International Monetary Fund and the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development have identified this key weakness. The OECD has stated, and I quote, "The current diversity of regulations, for example, each province having its own securities regulator, makes it difficult to maximize efficiency and increases the risk that firms will choose to issue securities in other countries. A single regulator would eliminate the inefficiencies created by the limited enforcement authority of individual provincial agencies," unquote. Similarly, the IMF has noted that, and I quote, "A federal regulator could coordinate more readily with other regulators in monitoring risks and responding quickly to a crisis, and could also have an enhanced focus on the issues that security markets may pose for national financial stability," unquote. So we are now ready to take another step to fix this flaw in the interests of protecting Canadian investors and improving our financial system. So today I am pleased to release a proposed Canadian Securities Act. This proposed legislation will be tabled for information in the House of Commons this afternoon. Later today, as previously promised, our government will also refer this act to the Supreme Court of Canada for its review. We will be asking the Supreme Court of Canada a clear question, and this is the question. Is the annexed proposed Canadian Securities Act within the legislative authority of the Parliament of Canada? J'ai l'honneur aujourd'hui de rendre
Today,
public
I
le
have
texte
the honor
proposé
to
d'une loi
make public
canadienne
this
sur
draft
la loi
legislation on securities.
déposera ce
The
texte de loi.
government will be tabling this bill in the Commons this afternoon.
Plus tard dans la
Later
journée,
on in the day,
nous l'avons promis,
as promised, our government will be referring the bill to the Supreme Court of Canada.
nous poserons alors une
We
question claire
will be asking a very clear question of the court.